Hey, Brooke.
Hey, Tom.
We're embarking on something unusual. We're going to get ourselves on YouTube and we're going to tell some stories to each other. And we hope it's interesting to other people.
Let's talk about how we came to do this and why we decided that this was a good idea.
What's this about?
Hello, my name is Baruch Bush. I'm a professor of law at Hofstra Law School in New York. And this is my good friend, Tom Walrab, my colleague and friend for at least 2 decades in the field of conflict and intervention.
The reason we liked each other and each other's ideas and stuff is what's behind this, I think, because it has to do with work that's focused on helping people in difficult situations to realize and get in touch with their own capacities.
So, Baruch, I actually read a book that you were the co-author of. And I had been a mediation practitioner for a number of years and was getting more and more disgruntled by my practice. What I thought mediation was really was incongruent with what I was doing. And I read your book, and suddenly I said, well, there's somebody that finally got my consternation about this. And so I reached out to you and your co-author, Joe Folger, and you kept having symposiums and lectures. And finally I started bringing you and Joe to Dayton, Ohio, so you could teach me and others. And we went to every symposium you offered that we could get to. And that's how we met.
What I remember is that not only did you show up at those big, gatherings, but then when we did some training for people who were interested in becoming mediators, when we did that, I kept seeing you in these classes. You came once, twice, 3 times. You were dumb and you couldn't pick it up, but you just, you were really interested. At some point along the way in those classes and, having lunch afterwards or coffee, whatever, you told me some pretty amazing stories about your life long before we had met, long before you were doing any mediation like you just talked about. That stuff really made an impact on me. Those stories really made an impact on me.
I think I told you these stories because, it's somewhere in my sense of what you had conceptualized and the practice that we had developed, because I think I supported developing the practice too. I think somewhere in me, I understood that some of the things that I had done in my life or experiences I had, they connected to what you were describing. And so I was understanding myself better. And that was helpful to tell you because you're the one that could understand. And you would then say something to me and ask me a question, and it would deepen my understanding, enhance my experience of my own life.
Again, coming back to the first question we've talked about here, which is, well, what are we doing here and why are we doing this? But a lot of those experiences were, the kinds of things that lots of people go through in their lives that are not, connected with some sort of formal setting where people sit down in a room with a third party. They're just going through their lives, being with people around them, in their families, at work, in their communities, in very difficult situations, and finding ways to be helpful to the people around them. People can learn, I think, and that's, I think, why we're doing this. People can learn from what you've been through and what we've learned about it, talking together, something about their own experiences and how they can understand their experiences and improve on them and do more of this kind of thing.
And so we sat down with each other and we retold these stories and talked to each other about them, and we recorded them, and that's what we're sharing with people now in this YouTube video series. We hope it resonates with other people, and we hope people can see themselves in some of these stories, in that they've had, like you said, they've also had these experiences. This is our attempt to clarify for ourselves, and to maybe make a contribution to what's happening in the world today. And somewhere along the line, we will go into more detail about the framework itself and the concepts and maybe even the mediation practice. But the other piece is that we can all improve how we act in the world as the framework accepts that all people are capable and they do want to connect. They don't want to have these negative interactions continually in their lives. They want to be able to interact and go on with their lives and be happy.
You know, some of us do this and have learned to do this and have tried to learn to do this consciously, intentionally, more than others, better than others. And for me, you're one of the people who's, you know, has a track record of doing this, you know, a half-century track record in situation after situation. I may know how to talk about it, but you know how to do it. And that's a whole different thing.
About 40 years ago, Tom, in the famous turbulent 60s, and we're both old enough to have been through them, you made a very unusual choice about where you wanted to go to college. Can you say a few words about that?
Younger people have read about the 60s, but what's happening today is to some extent similar to what was happening in the 60s. We had an opportunity, folks of our age, to open our eyes and our minds to what was going on as far as civil rights and justice in this country. And it was hard for many of us who grew up in white communities, exclusively white communities, to understand what was going on. Within 20 miles of my hometown, there was a historically black college. And I decided that, well, that's where I could go to learn. Not academia, not academics, but actually have black professors and black peers and authority figures who could actually teach me about what was going on. So yes, I stepped up, but it was a very clear to me an opportunity to learn the thing that needed to be learned by white people in this country.
And that meant going to this college, Central State University, near Dayton, where you wound up being the only
One of about 4 white folks who lived on campus. There were commuters from the surrounding communities, which was rural, who were white, but who lived on campus, and that was, for me, that was the real authentic experience.
Right.
I got to live and eat and sleep in a black community, be a minority, and have these folks teach me. I'm going to go back to Central State, where I went to college, which was a historical black college. And I went there to learn from peers who were African American and teachers and so forth, because I was confused about the civil rights movement. I was young and just didn't know. But I went into that environment and lived on campus, lived in the dormitory, and it was really a robust environment where I could say anything I wanted to say. I could get into any serious discussion I wanted to. And they were talking about what was happening in the world as far as the movement in this country. And I asserted myself because there was lots of generalities about white people. And hey, I'm standing up and I'm going to talk about white people.
And you're pretty much the only white person there.
There was one other white male in one of the dorms. And so I did that, and I consistently did that, and I was accepted. I was welcomed, really, for a while anyway. In this particular conversation, it was in the hallway, and I was right in there shouting, doing my stuff. At one point, one of my peers, a young man, just stopped and turned and looked at me straight in the eye and said, "I saw my uncle being lynched." Now, when I say that, even now, I have to pause, because it's not just a story. It's really a man dying at the hands of a mob, and someone my age experienced it. I think I came to the realization that I needed to back off and learn to listen better. So I think he took a risk in telling me that personal experience, and I think I have a responsibility, and for the rest of my life, not to step in and assume, based on my background and my intelligence and my education, that I understand you or anyone else in front of me, especially when the person is so different, being of a different culture, different race, different gender, whatever. And obviously everybody's different. So I need to essentially learn to listen and be quieter and speak softly and speak tentatively.